Okay, so this was the moment that I got back my MSI GeForce RTX 4090, the Ventus 3X, 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory. I've been without it for just shy of 2 weeks because it had stopped producing video output and the cooling fans started spooling up to 100%. So something that if you've been looking on the internet or you've been looking into getting one of the new generation of cards, whether it's from Nvidia or from AMD, you will no doubt be aware that many people have had issues with thermal loading. So whether it's the AMD and the vapor lock, or whether it's with Nvidia and the infamous bend in the power cable that can, in some instances, cause the power cable to overheat to such an extent that you get melting. And some people, unfortunately, found that their cards started to melt down within the PC. I was fortunate, I was lucky, I escaped that. So this is the card back from Overclockers. They took it. Unfortunately, when they put it on their test bench, they were able to replicate the same fault. They too lost the video output but had the audio. They tried it on various PSUs, and then they ultimately changed the cable, and that's where they found the fault. So they did say that they were glad to see that I had taken the precautions of ensuring that I seated the card properly, and also that I had ensured that all of the plugs on the power adapter were seated firmly. So even though there had become an issue with the bend in the cable, there wasn't the ensuing overheating at the point of connection. And as you can see from my case, the card fits, let's say, snugly. So there isn't like loads of space, there's no copious space, but there is enough space to fit the card. The dimensions fit nicely within my case. I had thought about getting a bigger case, but when the card came, I thought that it wasn't necessary. And the bigger case that I had ordered didn't have much more depth than this. It was just wider, longer. Now when you see, even when connecting the cables to the power supply cables coming off the Corsair 850W, it's just impossible to fit the cable within the case without there being some flex, some bend in some way. So the card has to sit, it sits horizontally, and when you look at it, to fit the cable without there being any bend in it whatsoever, you would have to attach the power cable to the graphics card perpendicular to the motherboard. It would have to be vertically mounted and stand literally 90 degrees perpendicular to the motherboard to avoid any bend whatsoever. So even with just gravity, once connecting the power cable to the PCI cable to plug it into the actual machine, the only way to avoid there being any bend would be if I had a case that was almost a cube. It would have to be double the depth. It would have to literally be a box. There's no way to attach it to the card, connect it to the power supply without there being some element of a bend. Now, when I was speaking with Overclockers, they stressed, and so all thanks to Overclockers, they were brilliant, but they stressed you need to avoid any extreme bends in the cable whatsoever. However, what I was probably more pressed with was, in my opinion, and it's my opinion obviously, I didn't have any extreme bends. Now, what they suggested, and they can't recommend it, is but where you see the sheathing around where the cable connects to the plug, that's where the stress, that's where the bend invariably is manifesting. So what I'm going to do is I have on order, should be arriving today, the Corsair variant of the 12-volt plug that doesn't have the sheathing. So there'll probably be less stress when just the natural gravity bend, or just the tension from the PCI cables pulls on the cable. that even though there will be some element of flex, it won't be restricted by that sheathing. So yeah, I've also ordered the Cablemod's 90-degree adapter, the fixed physical bend, or I say bend, the fixed physical 90-degree adapter, so there is no bend. Again, there's no flexing in a cable, and that's the only way that I can see that I'm going to avoid a repeat of getting 6 months in and the graphics card no longer wants to play. So yeah, I don't know if any of you have also had the same problems or similar problems, how you've managed to counter them. As I said, the only solution I've got to avoid mounting it vertically with no bend and getting a case that's twice as deep is to go with the Cablemod adapter piece, which is going to be about 3 to 4 weeks to deliver. I had originally thought that I would get the 180 and completely avoid there being any chance that the cable had to come anywhere near in contact with the glass side of the case. But when I looked at the case, the 180 would reintroduce the same problem, except instead of it being that the flex was at the top, the flex would be down the bottom. And if, to make sense, the cable would have to run vertically down the back plate of the graphics card, and then there would be an extreme bend where it met the motherboard. So here I am, just again making sure that when I connect the plugs, that they're flush, they're absolutely snug, as you can hear the click, to make sure that there's no chance that there's a gap. It's not 100% connected, so there's no chance of any resistance or heat build up. So again, all three, being really careful and conscious, just like I did the first time. And now the case of connecting the card and seating it in the motherboard. I don't know about you, but I'm always really conscious about not touching it. I know you see content creators and experts, and they're much more confident and comfortable. They don't care, they just touch it. Whereas for me, I just don't want to introduce any static charge. These things cost a lot. We all don't have money to burn, so I'm really glad that the card itself had no damage. But you can see again where the plug is, to fit the cable with no bend is impossible. Just absolutely impossible. Even if I went with the unwise option of seating the card, fitting the cable, and then not affixing the glass side panel, even if I went with that option, gravity alone and the orientation of the PCI cable into the PSU, those two factors alone would introduce a subtle bend in the cable. So I considered it. I thought maybe I could leave the glass case off until the replacement cable came, until the Cablemod's attachment came, but it's just not wise. I mean, I'm not sure if it comes up clearly in the video or not, but as I explained to Overclockers, considering I hadn't opened the case in 6 months, you can see it's really clean. There is no dust build-up. I myself was shocked. I expected there to be elements of dust build-up in there, but there's none. It's a completely pristine, clean internal bay. So that alone makes me extremely reluctant to mount the case, well, to mount the card and leave the side panel off. So the side panel will be going back on. I only have to run it for 24 hours with the default cable. I'll have the replacement cable within the next 24 hours. At the time of recording, I should have the cable probably in the next 3 hours, and then within 3 to 4 weeks max, maybe, I'll have the 90-degree Cablemod's adapter, and hopefully that will give me enough mitigation to ensure that I don't have a repeat of the problem in the next 6 months. Just making sure that where I plugged it into the PCI slot that I've selected. I've removed enough of the back panel so that all of the HDMI, DVI ports are accessible, but also to ensure that I haven't taken out too many to then leave an open vacant bay that would allow more dust to be ingested into the machine. So you can also see that along with like the cooling radiator on the left, we've got 3 additional fans for the case. This particular PC build was built by Overclockers as well, so I'm really happy with it. And there it is, it fits. As I said, it's a snug fit, but there is ample space. And when you look, again, you see, so just having connected the cable, well, connected the graphics card, you can see that if I were to attempt to now plug in the power cable with no bend whatsoever, it would need to be twice as deep. And even if it were twice as deep, the PSU would need to be vertically above the card so that you had the power cable connected to the PSU and the power cable connected to the card in a straight line with no flex whatsoever. So I just don't understand. I don't know. I know there's 600 watts going through the cable, but I just don't know how Nvidia didn't experience the same challenges going through development and QA. I would love to see the test beds or the machines that they tested the cards in, to see how big they were, to see what orientation they had the cables in, that they never experienced any of this thermal loading that we as consumers have been experiencing. But there, it's connected. Again, it's connected really snug, just making sure that there's no flex, no wobble. When you look at the cable, I haven't bent them. They're just, through the natural gravity, flexing. And you can see it fits just inside the case. So even when I fix the glass panel to the side, it's not adding any additional pressure. It's not sitting on it. It's just gravity alone and the natural tension of connecting it to the PCI cables that has introduced that bend. And it's a gradual, subtle bend. I wouldn't consider that extreme in the slightest. But that mounting, and now comment below if you think, actually no, Mark, that's just too tight, that's just an extreme bend.